Hi, everybody. Joe Moore here. Just getting everything set up to go live with Instagram, but happy Veterans Day. I'm joined today by Zach Skiles from the Heroic Hearts Project. How you doing today, Zach?
Good. Thanks for having me, Joe. How you doing?
Absolutely. Doing lovely. Beautiful day here in Colorado. Gorgeous because we've been all clouded up for felt like a week and a half, which is rare out here. But very happy to be back in the sun. Yeah, and today we're here to talk about Heroic Hearts Project, your kind of perspectives, and I'm sure we're going to get into all sorts of fun stuff too. So let's talk a little bit about Heroic Hearts Project before we jump into you. What is Heroic Hearts Project?
So Heroic Hearts Project is started by Jesse Gould back in 2017, where prior to this, Jesse was moving through his own healing journey and found his way into South America and exposed himself to different psychedelic practices, some traditional medicine practices and ayahuasca, and received a lot of benefit for it. Saw kind of how it helped him from his past military experiences and just life in general. And he wanted to return that to the veteran community. He wanted to help other people kind of through different obstacles. I think, especially as somebody who had been through the VA system and experienced a lot of bureaucracy and red tape that kind of prevented a lot of his needs being met. It's a common story for a lot of folks that we're still figuring out. And so in his journey, he created Heroic Hearts and began sending veterans down to South America, Costa Rica, Mexico, really developing relationships with traditional shaman and other folks in the community to build kind of a relationship of reciprocity as well, and kind of being respectful and understanding of the culture that we were stepping into. And little by little also brought people back into the United States after their experiences and started building community. So instituted what we know now today as peer support with Heroic Hearts, and help people obtain the ability to coach folks properly when bringing them into preparation and helping them through the integration process with psychedelic medicines. And so that's kind of the baseline model of how it got started back in 2017 and grew into what was the international wing and now the domestic wing happening in Oregon state, where psilocybin services have been legalized statewide and offered in specific service centers for individuals or groups. And with the military being collectivistic culture, groups are really, really common and beneficial for our community. And so Jesse continued the model, and together we've set up some really great practices with psilocybin services in Oregon. And we've got our eye now on Colorado for the coming year, and I think that's all I'll say about that for now.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I really, I think I met Jesse pretty early in his project, linked up in Denver, and I was like, oh yeah, this seems like something that really does need to happen, and I'm really excited about it. I'm glad that it's being done more domestically. It always seemed like such a drag to have to bring people out of the country, because why have to flee the country to heal when
Yeah,
you
absolutely.
put your life on the line for so long?
Right. And when we talk about freedom, like what is it that you can really do in your own country? What is it that you're actually fighting for and serving? And being able to not have that freedom to heal is a big deal. Something else that I think is pretty unique to that whole ecosphere is the spouse programs. So I always lump everybody in together at first in veteran community, meaning veteran spouses and family members. But I I forget at times that it's valuable to articulate it, because it's actually
Mm.
really unique to the heroic hearts model, where Allison Wilson had a great, or has, excuse me, has a great program, the Hope Project, that was integrated into Heroic Hearts and serves military spouses and partners, that really, I think, treats the whole family unit in that sense, because we can have folks who do leave the country, or maybe even go domestically. They leave for their own experiences and then come back to the family unit. And that unit needs a little education in what's gone on for them, rightfully so. What's changed? How best do we kind of support and integrate what needs to happen to move forward? And then how does the rest of the family get that same healing?
Hmm. Yeah, I want to come back to this. This is a really big topic that we could go on for ages about. So I'll take a note to flag that. But I'm really curious to learn a little bit more about you. I noticed the PsyD after your name, so you're a psychologist, and um, I assume psychology came first before the psychedelic interest. Would I be
Yes,
accurate there?
you're
Yeah,
accurate. Good
cool.
job, bud. That's not many people
You
actually
never
put that.
know. Never know out here in psychedelia. But let's talk about your kind of path to getting here. So you served. Can you tell us a little bit about your
Yeah.
time
So
enlisted?
I was in the Marine Corps. I joined actually in 2000, back when Bill Clinton was
Mm,
president. So this was pre 9/11, and ended up invading Iraq. I was a motor vehicle operator, a driver, 3531, and was exposed to combat in 2003, and really went through my own healing journey as well, which put me in touch with holistic care models. Meditation was huge for me, and so I threw myself as much as I could into the disciplines of healing. And as I was kind of moving through that process, I was also trying to access VA care, and had some actually success with it, and would hear from folks occasionally, Zach, you kind of have a knack for this. This is something you might want to think about, as the VA itself uh, can struggle at times or need a little bit of help, as we all can, when it comes to cultural understandings or awareness, competencies of sorts. And it's a system that has like 90% civilian when it comes to um, the medical providers that are employed there or training there. So there's just an opportunity that I think that I saw early on, and thought to myself, okay, I understand my community. I understand what the VA needs. I'm good with psychological practices. I might as well step in here. And that was, as as a young person, that was just as much thought as I gave it. I was a little naive to think that I was going to come in and change the whole system around, but that was a goal. So that's why I went for the doctorate as well. I wanted to understand every practice of therapy that I could, and continue to serve my community. And so as I was uh, working at different VAs, the Northern California VA specifically, I was helping develop um, a polytrauma residential program called the Post Deployment Assessment and Treatment Program.
mm,
And it was focusing on TBI, PTSD, and chronic pain, and had some good success with folks. And I would hear from people occasionally from special forces communities who gained some interest because we focused on blast injuries. And they ended up inviting me down to Mexico, and being introduced to a regimen of ibogaine and 5-MeO DMT. I started shadowing facilitators, and learning from also traditional medicine workers as well. And very quickly understood that if I were to continue on, learn, and train, I needed to also respect the culture. And learning from Native American practitioners as a white person was uh, another case of potential misappropriation. And so I very luckily just widened my net and scope and started to reach out to find people of my heritage and background, and started also learning from uh, a a psychiatric nurse practitioner of Ireland, Martin Duffy, who was in some of the first ketamine trials in Trinity College, Dublin, to act as a mentor and really an elder, a teacher for me. And that's kind of the baseline of how I then stepped into my postdoc at UCSF for the translational psychedelic research program, and helped out with their facilitation of psilocybin trials, and started to build 5-MeO trial for them, and slowly met the folks up at the Portland VA as I was beginning to organize uh, providers and researchers at the VA after being toured around in 13 different regions. I was one of the only um, combat veterans who was also trained as a psychologist. So I got a lot of interviews in the VA system to come work for different folks, and was very honest about what it was that I wanted to concentrate on. And so I started to meet people who wanted to actually engage in research, and had some ideas for psychedelics entering into the VA system, and was able to start to organize people with the help of Reconsider to put our heads together and continue to learn and grow. And in that, found myself at the Portland VA as their primary therapist for the psilocybin for methamphetamine use disorder trial, as well as the first group MDMA group psychotherapy trial. And slowly but surely, sat with the restraints, but I guess you would call it restraints of clinical research in a federal system where I was only able to help a limited amount of people. And so I continued my relationship with Jesse, where I had been helping him out with complex cases that would move through heroic hearts, and had conversation after conversation about the fact that I could help probably twice as many people as I had helped in a year at the VA. I could do twice that in a weekend with heroic hearts. And so for me, it was a no-brainer. And so after meeting my limits with the VA, stepped into heroic hearts, and we've been taking on different projects together little by little. It's been a really great relationship.
I love that. And
Yeah.
have you encountered resistance in your professional life around being interested in non-FDA approved interventions like this?
Gosh, I think everybody does, like rightfully so. Everybody needs to be a skeptic. We all need to kind of accept the fact that we don't know things. And if we don't know things, to be low and slow, or start low and slow. It doesn't mean being closed off. So there's a balance to this where everyone has to kind of acknowledge that we're still learning, and how we like to learn is different in every person's style. So for me, have to talk that out with everybody that I would meet that was a bit of a gatekeeper. And I would just discuss their limitations, their concerns, and walk through kind of what people needed to share or express in order to come to this together. There's another organization that I started working for while I was working for Heroic Hearts, which is Heal Ukraine Trauma. And there were several conversations with folks who worked at the Ministry of Health who were rightfully concerned about an American organization stepping in to help out with psychedelics, and really just making sure that we were all on the same page with harm reduction, and that we were coming in to any community with the sense that we were trying to help people who were already engaged in practices with psychedelics, but making sure that they were doing it safely and sustainably. And so that's kind of been my message for a lot of folks, is that people have been doing this for thousands of years. We want to better understand it, and we want to make sure that we're doing it safely and sustainably. Um, and to that, there's a lot more to kind of open up to when you find that, okay, we're not just trying to make every space Burning Man. We're trying to actually utilize what's working for people clinically and spiritually as well.
Mm, yeah, thanks for that. Um, so have you was there like an initial success story that you saw that kind of blew your socks off and said, I'm in?
Yeah, there's so many. It's hard to actually pick. Uh, I gosh, there's one gentleman I know who's well known in special forces and um, had over 50 lesions on his brain from just a career of blast injuries, and and in just a few sittings with psychedelics, uh, his brain was able to actually heal and correct himself to reset so that his endocrine system began producing the needed hormones again naturally. Uh, the ability to kind of regulate emotion, to build sustainable relationships and community, the sense of groundedness that this person returned to. I watched a medical miracle happen, and then uh, really really watched it then become this kind of growth and foundation that other people built themselves on as well. And once seeing that, I was hooked. Like that's a dramatic one, and in actuality, the clinician in me was was seeing even littler miracles. The fact that I could uh, sit with somebody in a weekend and they could open up to themselves in ways that would take me 6 months to get them down the road with the VA with standard clinical care. And within 2 days, we would be doing in depth trauma work that would take us up to a year to do. To me, that's a miracle. And it was enough for me to say, I'm spending much more time on this subject.
Hmm. Yeah, I love that. And can you talk a little bit about like why, uh, from your perspective as a psychologist, what is happening at the VA such that a lot of people want to complain about their care? Like, I know people are getting amazing care, and each
Yeah,
location is different too.
totally.
But like, what is that like is kind of having people complain so much or not get the results they need or want?
I think sadly some of it is the way that the constraints around communication are. The VA can't market themselves. Like the federal government can't really market themselves when they do something amazing and great. So a lot of the times, all we hear is about the mistakes and things that are newsworthy that have gone awry. When in actuality, people are saving lives and making miracles happen regularly at the VA. We just don't hear about it. And I think there's also, I don't want to paint too rosy a picture there. I think there's in the field in general, there's a serious need for mental health competency and practitioners that specifically can attune themselves to the needs of the veteran community. When I talked about the fact that 90% of medical providers are all civilian with no personal um, history in the veteran community, it's because our culture as a whole have changed. There used to be a time where everybody was kind of spending some time at least in a military setting and had a better handle on what that life or lifestyle would look like. So I think there's some legitimate cross-cultural issues. I think there's on whole in the US a societal issue when it comes to the mental health crisis that we're in. And then I think there's also the communication issue, just what it is that we're able to actually talk about. That's not to undermine people who have had legitimate issues to call for and address with the VA. There are providers who, unfortunately, are not always held accountable for their actions because of the bureaucracy in the VA, and it's something that I think everybody is trying their best to figure out.
Is there um is there truth to the story I've heard a few times around clinicians perhaps doing something that could lose them their license and then they could get transferred to a different facility?
Absolutely, it's a little
Um,
bit like the Catholic Church
yeah,
in that sense. Um,
I didn't want to say it, but I was going to say it. Yeah, that's
it's
interesting.
everybody saying it. I'm
Um,
sorry. This is one of the reasons why I
um,
do what I do.
yeah, so that's really interesting. So, like, is there a story around that? Is it just like this is efficient? They're already in our network, like spin up somebody, or what do you think's going on there?
I don't know. I'm not a part of those conversations,
Hmm.
unfortunately.
Hmm.
I think in general, the bottom line is about money and training. So when you train
Hmm.
someone, a significant amount of money has gone into that system, and
Hmm.
that employee is then valued. And then there's also just there's significant issues with the unions that are helping out employees in different ways. And I think mental health in general, I think in medicine in general, it's a complicated field that a lot of the times folks can externalize what can be an internal process, and there needs to be more help and awareness around what's manifesting for different folks. But I think specifically at the VA, if we're looking at the numbers of transgressions when it comes to military sexual trauma and combat exposure, there is a pattern that some clinicians can fall into when it comes to breaking boundaries and having a sense of intensity around the sharing of an experience. Obviously, if we're talking about like sexual material that will come up in military sexual trauma, uh, the boundary transgressions there can be obvious, but there is also a similar manifestation when it comes to the breaking of boundaries and combat exposure when moving through the healing process and conversations around that, the cathartic experience somehow for many people encourages a kind of boundary transgression that they feel as if they need to share some of themselves as well, or there needs to be something given in this connection. And I think some of it just needs more supervision around. Some of it needs more understanding and education. It's one of the reasons why I teach it at UC Berkeley and CIIS and Naropa and other psilocybin certificate programs, is because I want to help people understand and kind of demystify the combatant training and experiences. So when they're in sessions with folks, they're primed a little bit, they understand a bit more, and there's not a strong pull to feel as if they need to do something here. The person in the chair is actually moving through a needed process, and they know their lane in which to rest in.
Yeah. Um, yeah. I don't want to always demonize VA. I know there's so many good people at the VA. There's actually a lot of really interested parties in this whole psychedelic topic in there.
Totally.
Um, organizing sometimes covertly, which I love, because they care so much about the patients, right? That they're willing to actually risk their job a little bit, which I find
Yeah,
amazing. And
absolutely.
yeah, so and there's that new center in New York that actually looks really good. Like there's this funny thing where like, do you actually want to go do 5 grams equivalent of psilocybin in like Bellevue Hospital that has like a really scary history, or do you want to do it in like a really beautiful, comfortable environment? And they actually started building these. I think didn't UCLA just launch one? And I think
Yeah.
there's one in New York that's affiliated with the VA in some way.
Yeah. Yeah. There's so much going on right now. I'm having a hard time tracking it, but there's going to continue to be these kind of stylistic calls for services that folks honestly may have a hard time keeping up with. It's one of the bottleneck issues when talking about models of scarcity. If there's
Mm-hmm.
going to be enough medicine for people with the amount of folks who would like to step into services. Um, and then where would those people like to have those services? Is it in a naturalistic setting? Is it in a clinical setting? What kind of clinical setting? Is it the more for lack of a better word, more bougie setting of what they have over at UCLA? Or are we more comfortable with a hospital setup? And
Mm-hmm.
I'm surprised each time. Myself, I love being out in nature. I feel great in it. I can understand the bougie setting, but some people really want clinical efficiency and feel most comfortable and safe in a hospital setting. So I'm continually reminded to remain client centered and open and continually be a generalist when it comes to what it is that I'm offering and helping with.
So, a gentleman named Douglas just asked a question of I'm going to paraphrase it, but what substances are you most interested in clinically for people, going through, let's just say PTSD and perhaps even TBI?
Yeah. So, excuse me, I got a little bit of a cold. Um, there's a variety here. So I'm most interested for psilocybin and MDMA for people who are stepping into a psychedelic experience and wanting to take on post trauma symptoms and moral injury. I think MDMA is a clear cut no brainer for post trauma work. I think if you're wanting to kill two birds with one stone when talking about moral injury and PTSD, your go-to is psilocybin for mystical experiences, as well as being able to have that kind of novice orientation where you are seeing perspectives from a different place. And then for TBI, I've seen it happen time and time again. Ibogaine is doing amazing things for the brain and body that we're still figuring out right now. But there's a lot of hope I have in this medicine when it comes to deep core changes and structural changes in our systems. I think 5-MeO DMT as well when we're talking about being able to actually integrate into a medical system, finding kind of a good place, a good intersection where we can blend practices together. Because right now there's an issue when it comes to the medical model. Say what you will about it. I'm just staying open with it. Uh, to be able to scale any psychedelic practice is an issue right now, and having an 8-hour session with two facilitators is something that the medical model is going to have a hard time with. But when you look at 5-MeO DMT, you're looking at a much more fast acting experience um, that would require just a different set and setting for folks. So there's aspects of that medicine that I'm staying open to and see some promise around 5-MeO even more so than ibogaine, because ibogaine has so many different ramifications right now when it comes to um, just medical safety. I think all of it requires a good amount of protection and safety, but ibogaine requires a special bit as well.
Right, right. There's a lot there. Um,
Yeah.
in your understanding of the recent paper that was it Nolan Williams kind of published along with some folks who did some 5-MeO and
Yeah.
ibogaine, like was that literally healing dead tissue, or is that lesions that were showing up in their images? Like, how do you understand that?
So uh, those ones I actually got to work on as a facilitator, which is cool.
Oh, great.
Um, my understanding is that we're beginning to prune and build. So healing dead tissue is a one way to couch it. We're starting to
Mhm.
actually have active navigation away from atrophy and then a building upon synapses. So we're having that's why you're seeing lesions shrink, is that there's just no more
Mhm.
activation and the then adaptation to be able to heal that area takes on precedence.
That's interesting. Yeah, I remember Jesse telling me a long time ago, Jesse Gould, around this idea that, even shooting rifles regularly can create a lot of like subconcussive trauma
Yes.
on the brain. And like you're shooting many, many thousands of rounds over your career, right? So you're just like, how do we even want to look at that? And then he had this idea. I don't know if this has been developed at all, but he was suggesting that uh how to put it, a lot of people were getting misdiagnosed with PTSD when they really had TBIs. Is
Mhm.
this
Yeah.
something you've kind of picked up on? Or like,
Yeah.
I know you can fit category diagnosis of PTSD when you have other stuff going on, but how do you like to think about that?
I think of it in areas of the brain, quite literally anatomically. The same areas of the brain are affected by both post trauma and PTSD. It's one of the reasons why we were further developing the residential program at the Northern California VA with those three factors: TBI, PTSD, and chronic pain, because they were in the same elements or same anatomical regions of the brain. And so folks uh, who are unable to regulate in different ways, the overshadowing, the clinical overshadowing that can take place is one of those chicken and egg scenarios. Is this because of your post trauma? Is this because of the TBI? Um, and having the ability to step back and be able to claim one or the other simply isn't anything that anybody has been able to do just yet. So the fallback from the federal system and onward has been to concentrate on cognitive abilities, on the TBI itself, have that then echo into post trauma or chronic pain. And really, for myself, I I treat everything as trauma. So for
Hmm.
me, whatever diagnosis we're looking at, we're focusing around a core experience of trauma. And whether that's in like the frontal lobe, whether that's in a temporal area, wherever that need is at, I'm also connecting it to the body. So having an ability to really assess what areas might be impacted starts to give you a little insight on this one person, so that you can start to pinpoint exactly for them what is it that's really taking the most precedence, what has the most need. Is it TBI? Is it chronic pain? um, yeah, there's so many different manifestations of it that it's really hard to articulate for people in a cookie cutter sense.
Hmm. Cool. So what what do we know right now about like the state of veteran mental health? Like once you get out, is it immediately the case that a good portion of people are having a hard time? Is it like a few months out when people, or how do you like to think about that?
There's, I think for me, as I'm thinking about it with fear periods. So
Hmm.
there's there's kind of timelines that people move into after their transitioning period when it comes to, let's say that they've had some exposure to combat or any kind of military sexual trauma, or maybe they just had some kind of training accident. um, there's a general period afterwards in which that their brain and body has this neuroplasticity. Um, I consider it kind of the wisdom of trauma in that sense, where a lot of folks will move through almost like what a psychedelic experience will admit, and then you'll have a fear period in which those experiences are consolidated, and the brain and body then cannot be really disturbed. It moves through its own process of being encoded. And we're finding out in research that this is actually pretty detrimental to then add on a psychedelic experience to it, that this can actually worsen symptoms of PTSD. And and so moving through that time period of a year or so for folks is what we're looking at. We're waiting on the back end for then symptoms to start to crop up, and that's when we kind of know, okay, now we can start moving in with psychedelic assisted therapies. Um, so we're trying to hone in more so on timelines and medicine specifically. What is the right medicine for this person and their physiology? How is it that they kind of hold their angst or depression or trauma? What is it that they're going to be best served by? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. I love the idea of customized medicine like that. I think that would be really, really fun and really
Yeah.
helpful if hyper target like that.
Yeah.
Um, so can you talk a little bit more about these affinity groups that have been set up? So like the idea of everybody going from around the world to a single site for a retreat, and then they disperse across the globe versus using people from Oregon in a retreat, or getting people from Oregon or one
Absolutely.
location in a retreat. Yeah.
Yeah. So we have, gosh, quite a bit. A bunch of different affinity groups when you're talking about LGBT, BIPOC, spouses, uh, rural veterans, urban veterans. There's um, many different subgroups to give a lot of love to. And we've consistently been continuing on our LGBT groups in the international wing, and starting up a BIPOC centered affinity group here in the domestic program. Um, it's, I think, for a lot of folks, a huge necessity to be able to connect on shared experiences, to be able to grow together within your community. Um, there's something that we see in all of peer support that doctors or medical providers simply cannot touch or affect. And it's the emotional corrective process that somebody goes through in their healing journey. The people who are in service during someone's therapeutic sessions, uh, if they are peer support, those emotionally corrective experiences, the trust we have in our relationships in our communities, are much higher rates at when you're also dealing with psychologists or other therapists. Not as much. So you take that wisdom into affinity groups, because now you're getting into really significant shared experiences where folks, I think, in the military can be meet a ton of oppression when you're talking about people who are coming in from don't ask, don't tell, or the kind of racism that can be found in the military at times in specific units. Thankfully, there's a lot of protection and kind of merit based practices that veterans can lean on when it comes to accountability. But that doesn't mean that there's not racism in these systems. And so when it is experienced, um, there's a needed connection and voice to be given, and to be able to move those through those experiences together, I think is uh, of ultimate benefits. And then what's really beautiful to see uh, is that when people have that strong foundation, when people have healed, to be able to turn around and offer a hand up to others is something wildly empowering, and that I think communities really gain a ton of from a ton of healing.
W- Why do you think it is that some are less likely to seek support? Like, does their trauma not match up with what's expected? Or is it like what I've heard is, I'm not all that disabled. I know guys that are way worse off, so they should get the care. Or how do you see that?
Yeah. Um, I think it's a part of our training, honestly. There's a lot of people who don't want to be the weak link. There's a lot of people who also are told over and over again, myself included, you are not a special snowflake. This is your job. You're just doing your job. There's nothing special about it. Um, and you believe that, and to a certain extent it's kind of true, but also your job is significant, your job is very difficult, and so to really wrap your head around what that means in order to take care of yourself in a significant position needs to be revisited and reconsidered. So for a lot of folks, myself, I can offer as a example, there was a piece of me that was following the Vietnam veteran kind of archetype when I got back from the invasion of Iraq. That you just had some baggage that you had to white knuckle it through with. There was no understanding that there was anything you could actually do with that because I had seen what had happened to a prior generation. And then there's the aspect of saying, I was in urban warfare, but I was not in the jungles of Vietnam. I was not on the beaches of D-Day. There are a ton of people who have had it way worse than me, and I need to just tighten it up a little bit. When in actuality, our time frames and lives are very different, and there's no good comparison there actually that's going to serve you in that. And so that's just one of many issues and influences.
Mm, yeah. Yeah, the idea of relative trauma is can be really problematic. I remember reading a couple books. What was it? Like on violence? No, was that there's this gentleman who's kind of like a trainer who is trying to tell folks like, okay, if you have something super intense happen, you might need to unplug for a couple days or weeks to like get to the point where you're not like making your trauma super worse. And then he
Yeah.
started suggesting things around video games and electric lights in the barracks where you don't necessarily have to sleep 8 hours. Like you got
Yeah.
all this artificial light, you can stay awake forever. So do you, have you dug into any data around that?
When it comes to the general practice of like really having a break from electronics, it's something that we respect a
Hmm.
lot in all our retreats. It's a funny thing that I kind of show up and take everyone's cell phones for the time being. There's always like a weird letting go process that needs to happen with that. But we do. I'm still building the data that we're collecting right now from the domestic side. Grace is doing an amazing job with the data on the international stuff right now. Um, but what we are seeing anecdotally is that when people just expose themselves to the natural elements. So before we had these Victorian rooms with lights that are run on electricity, when we just had the sun, when we had fire and candles, our bodies regulated themselves at a core level. And so returning to naturalistic settings calms a deeper part of ourselves than we're able to in a Victorian style house with electricity. So I kind of just return to that with folks as I'm taking all the electronics away, um, and what I'm seeing in people is is an ability to ground and also connect. So the intention of the group is always to connect with each other and then build upon that healing and intelligence that can happen, so that people start to step into their healing and their roles within a group, so that there's a call for purpose usually in somebody's life, and in that group they find it when connecting with others as well as themselves,
Mm.
and really being able to then like take some deeper dives and enact any kind of external practice that is serving them.
Yeah. Have you run into any data around chronic pain resolution with some folks going through these programs?
We're collecting it right now, actually.
Mm.
Um, what we're asking folks is that uh, we're we're checking in with kind of like their levels from beginning to end and what qualitatively has been happening with them. Everybody is really different, and on a whole, just speaking about my time just in the field before heroic arts, chronic pain is a moving dartboard for everyone. Um, there's a larger operation happening at the VA right now where we are collecting as much data as possible, just to start to understand the vast numbers of Americans that are moving through different states of fibromyalgia or blunt force trauma, whatever it is that's causing uh, chronic pain. But what
Mhm.
we've seen with psychedelics oftentimes is that it decouples the individual from the experience of pain. And it's something that I think a lot of folks will find with regular antidepressants, which is how you kind of get into the issues with big pharma that a lot of people can have when we're talking about other medications like opioids, people who genuinely need them because of their pain. And also there's needed therapy and help around decoupling the the consciousness that is involved as an identity to that pain. Is that making sense for you?
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's awesome.
Yeah, this really attached. Robin's gonna hate me because I'm gonna talk about the default mode network, but that sense that we're decoupling and altering the default mode network. It's something that many people have talked about, but that is your narrative. That is your connection to the pain as well. And so if we're able to step back from that a little bit, we're alleviating those symptoms. And it's one of the reasons why people have symptom remissions for up to 2 to 3 months in some cases. Everybody's different. There's always a variety of experiences, but when you decouple that network, you're looking at a longer symptom remission from pain.
Mm. Yeah, I do some work with the Psychedelics and Pain Associations, like specifically focused on this, and
Yeah,
put together a free curriculum that's pretty robust. Court Wing contributed that one. It's pretty impressive. So maybe check that out. It's just on our platform, and it's like all the world leaders in chronic pain and psychedelics, and pretty fantastic. And
yeah,
I'm hopeful that people can have a lot of resolution from their chronic pain once we understand this a little bit better. In fact, I think Colorado mandated it as part of their psilocybin training license requirements to get
yeah,
educated on chronic pain treatments, which is really, I think, a revolutionary thing.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think in general, Colorado's been infused a little bit more with the medical system, whereas Oregon is it's more about the service. So there's some different models that I think are going to pan out in really great ways.
Yeah. So, what kind of stuff would you love for people to know about veterans' mental health issues and heroic hearts?
Man, so much. There's a lot of stuff that I teach right now at Berkeley and CIIS where I am stepping into the demystification of combatant experiences and the manifestation of uh, spiritual or large experiences being spiritual emergence in some cases, and having the ability to really sit with and uh, hold a person through a challenging experience, and really start to adjust what challenging looks like or means in some way, if it's bad or if it's actually just really a challenging experience that can yield some significant benefits. It's really in the interpretation for the individual. So
Mm.
for me, what I often hope for in a lot of people's process with this is these intersections that we all exist in. And one of them is the intersection of the protector or warrior. The fact that we all have a warrior or protector in ourselves. If we think about the inner family, excuse me, cold's getting to me. The inner family systems model. Uh,
Hmm.
they're great protectors that I think everyone has fashioned. And in the case of veterans, we've both externally and internally been trained to fashion them really well. And so I think there's
Mm.
actually a really good model within the veteran community right now of accessing the shadow warrior that I've been slowly developing, and having the ability to sit with different acts of perpetration, self perpetration or external perpetration, um, victimhood, or the kind of learned helplessness that can come up from burnout in different places in the world.
Hmm.
This is a model that I think folks can draw some wisdom from when engaging with the veteran community and starting to reach out for help, because we have consistently found ourselves at the forefront of getting PTSD and trauma related disorders into the DSM manual, excuse me, into the DSM, and then moving cannabis through our political systems to be able to now kind of take on a similar bipartisan role when moving psychedelics into different states. There continues to be a lot of leadership and a lot of care that's happening in different veteran organizations. So having veterans involved with your uh, services or programs, I think is going to ultimately benefit folks more so than they may realize. So I encourage everybody to stay open as much as possible and learn, because I think there's an untapped resource here in some communities.
Mm. Yeah. And are you hopeful at all around these kind of state models like Oregon, Colorado, and whatever else might happen to be next, making a difference? Or um, do you have some doubts about it? Or, are you more interested in a federal move?
I think that I want all things. I want all of the above, because there's more than enough work to go around for everybody, and there's a larger system that will have its challenge, both state and federal
Mm.
system. And I think that together we're actually going to provide this variety of stylistic care that is needed by a large population. And as much as I want it, excuse me, as much as I want it in the federal system, my concerns is that it's going to take another 10 years when you look at the fact that MDMA has been pushed back for a phase three, another round of phase three trials, which is going to take at least 3 to 5 years. And then we're talking about moving that into the VA system or the federal system of some kind, where we're then implementing the service and having to go through implementation sciences and making sure that we're operating from a sustainable model and have the money to pay for the medicines and the services, as well as how we're rolling it out with the right training. So they're still figuring out what training model to approach this with, or what therapeutic model to train folks with. Um, so we're looking at another 3 to 5 years when it comes to that. And if we're starting to stack this on top of each other, we're seeing a much more accessible route when it comes to state services or when it comes to these private programs like Heroic Hearts that are ready to roll and have been rolling since 2017. So there's a piece of me that sees a lot of hope with everybody in the game, while at the same time, uh, I'm wanting to be realistic and really just help everybody meet the scaffolding that they need, because we're all going to be in different places at different points. It's my hope and dream that we'll find Heroic Hearts one day acting as a contracted provider for the VA, which is uh, crazy for me to even say, but I think it's actually possible. And so having that out in the world is my ultimate hope in making that happen.
Mm. Yeah, I love hearing that. So, um, how can people help? I imagine there's ways to donate, there's ways to volunteer. Is there more than that, or?
Yeah. So right now, the issue is always going to be about funding. Uh,
Mhm.
Heroic Hearts is and has been the organization to bet on in this. We have an amazing team. There's other organizations that I'm working for that have a strong core team as well, and just really staying open to helping the veteran community as a whole. Um, I want to kind of give my encouragement and all for. And so if we're open to volunteering when it comes to uh, stepping in on your competency, I would encourage
Mm.
that. You may notice some hesitancy in saying, all right, everybody get in here, because what we're seeing even in psychedelic spaces is some issues with transcendence, right? We want to do a lot for the world. But what are we actually good at? What is it that we're competent in, and how is it that we can help? So really sitting with what it is that you think you can provide, and then moving in with that, making sure that we're educated. If coaching is something you want to do, what is it that you have to kind of show for that? What are your certifications in that realm? And
Mhm.
then something when it comes to business or marketing. If it is just funding, which we need at all times to be able to move systems forward, um, I would encourage everybody to access that inner intelligence and move forward accordingly.
And is there a big event in Los Angeles coming up?
There is, yeah. And I actually just, if folks want to help in anything, one of the things that just hit me actually is the workbook that's just come out. If there's some call to want to understand the process more, or maybe you have a veteran in your life that is moving through a process of integration in psychedelics or other expanded consciousness practices, when I'm thinking about meditation or holotropic breath work, there's a ton of stuff that is actually aligned with this workbook and goes straight to the funding for Heroic Hearts. So um, for me, if I'm wanting to help out just here and now, I would actually grab that workbook for sure.
Mm.
Um, your gosh, your last question is escaping me. My
Oh,
cold
it's
is,
about the Los Angeles event.
yes, that's right.
You're doing a great job preparing cold, by the way.
Thanks, bud. Um, so having, gosh, I'm looking forward to this event. There's going to be a lot of great people there to connect with and kind of learn more about. Um, I think anybody who's attending these is going to learn more about our organization, but also the personal
Mhm.
stories. I can sit here all day and tell you about the clinical aspects to this being a benefit. And I think really when you look into somebody's eyes, when you connect with their energy and you see just what can happen to a person's life and what it is doing continually. When we're talking about building communities, as we have been in Oregon for the past year, you start to see the sustainability and the strength of it. And so I'm excited to see that take place in Southern California.
Yeah, it's going to be lovely. So people can find info at the Heroic Arts website. I'm trying my best to be there. I've got to come up with some sort of outfit. I saw the dress code and I was like, what? All right. I'll figure it out. I have some, there's this classic joke about, they said, let's dress up like bikers. One threw on all the leather and one person showed up in like road cycling spandex. Like, oh, bikers, I get it.
Right.
So I've thought about it. I'm not sure I'm going to show up in spandex, but I'm very excited for that event and really hope I can make it.
Cool. Be great to
Yeah,
have
I
you.
just love, like you say, meeting people in person who are on this same mission.
Yeah.
It's really great. Yeah. Well, Zach, thanks so much for being here. I really appreciate your time and willingness to do it with a cold. And I hope I get to meet you in a few weeks out there in Los Angeles.
I'm looking forward to it, Joe. Thanks so much for having me. I'll see you soon.
Absolutely. Happy Veterans Day. Thanks again.
See ya.